especially on Manchester United. When you look at it, Stuart, yesterday, they lose to Arsenal, and they lose in what was a late show. Mm-hmm. But then you look at their Premier League record away to the Big Six under Ten Hag. They lost 6-3 to Manchester City. They drew 1-1 at Chelsea. They lost 3-2 at Arsenal. They lost 7-0, of course they did, at Liverpool. They lost 2-0 at Spurs. The list goes on. This is last season. They lost 3-1 at Arsenal yesterday. What is it telling us? That away from home, they can't do it against the big boys. No wins in 7.
Well, what it's telling us is Manchester United are not the Manchester United of Alex Ferguson era. That is for sure. They're not the biggest powerhouse around at the moment. There's 2, 3, maybe even 4 teams that are potentially stronger than them. And the most worrying thing for me, if I was United, the other 2 games that they've played that they've won this year, Wolverhampton at home, which they shouldn't have done. If Wolves had a striker, they could have won that 2-3-0 comfortably. If the referee would have given a late penalty, the game's a draw. And the Forest game, Forest 2-0 up in 6 minutes or so. So the alarm bells are there for about where United are actually going to finish in the division this year.
Where do you think they'll finish? Is it impossible to say with any degree of accuracy they will be...
Well, I think even with 4 games under their belt, I don't think you're seeing them in the top 2. That is for sure. And you're aiming for Champions League if you're them.
Yeah.
And that would be a successful season.
I mean, the stats show, Simon, they can't do it against the big guns away from home. They don't win against the big boys.
Well, I mean, the 2 teams that we considered to be better than Man United last season were obviously the 2 teams that were better than them, which was Man City and Arsenal. So I'm not entirely sure why we'd be surprised that Manchester United got beaten by those sides. The fact they got beaten away by Liverpool and the fact they got beaten away by Tottenham, okay, fine, but they finished above them in the league. So in the great scheme of things, whilst these are interesting statistics for us, it was, 2 years ago we were talking about this wonderful unbeaten away record that they had with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but it brought them the square root of bugger all. And so with that in mind, do we believe that Ten Hag has the ability to get this side closer to these sides at the top? Because I don't think any sensible observer, even the most obtuse of Manchester United fans, believe that they're at a stage where they're even going to get close to overtaking Man City. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about Manchester United finishing 3rd again? And is that awful? Well, it is awful in terms of what you expect Manchester United to be. But this is now cyclical. They don't have their own way. They don't have the issues. The people going on endlessly about the Glazers and how much the Glazers do and don't affect it. I listened to Gary Neville whilst talking about the offside lines yesterday being drawn, suggesting that in some shape or form that was because of the Glazers. And the reasons why there's this vacuum inside the football club and the reasons why these outcomes are manifesting themselves as they are is because of the Glazers. No. It's because the players aren't performing at the level they should be, the management isn't doing its job, and the recruitment policies are wrong. We're hearing people like Jadon Sancho coming out and talking about issues. Well, I wouldn't mind Jadon Sancho talking if he had a body of work to support any sort of pushback. He hasn't got a body of work. He's been poor since he stepped through the door. There might be reasons behind that. So you've got a whole culture.
Do you think Ten Hag's an elite manager?
Well, it depends what you think elite is. I mean, there's... for me,
you tell me.
Well, I think elite... The term elite, like world class, is thrown around like confetti too often, too easily. Elite means that you're one of a kind. You achieve something no one else can achieve. We consider elite to be people get in the top 4. There's only really significant people that win the leagues. Those are the elite guys. And you've got the next echelon of managers that probably Ten Hag falls into that bracket of.
Is he best in class?
For Manchester United?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think he's a very capable and a very good manager. But I don't think he's best in class. Best in class sits in the other dugout across the city. I think best in class is Jurgen Klopp. And albeit his performances in recent terms haven't dictated that, Chelsea haven't got best in class. Chelsea have got the best of the also-rans, which is Pochettino. Comes in, builds you a decent side, get you close, get you a whiff of success, but won't actually deliver you an outcome.
But if this was the record away from home against the big boys, say this was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's record, you'd be absolutely hammering into him this morning.
In the same way that I've made observations about Ten Hag. I made observations about his whole disposition last year, and it got turned into some ridiculous parody of the observation that I said, which was his suit didn't fit him. My actual position was he doesn't look like a man that's pushing his chest out and doesn't look like a man that's strong in his position. Now, we can see that he's strong because he makes observations, he makes statements, he makes declarations, he seems to have a view on the world, albeit the observations from those around the football world say, well, why don't his wingers do their job? Why do they think they have a choice? Why do his wingers think they can do different things than perhaps Man City wingers think they can do?
Well, he makes observations, Simon, and one of those was that he insisted that a wrong angle was viewed when Garnacho's late effort was disallowed for offside. I'm afraid, Eric, we've been on the PGMOL this morning, who've come back to tell us, for the Premier League, yesterday, 5 cameras are calibrated. The main wide camera, both 18-yard box cameras and both goal line cameras. In other words, Stuart, they're all up and running. Of course they are. Hawkeye can also use any broadcast camera to identify the point of contact with the ball by the attacker and synchronises all cameras for this purpose. All cameras. The broadcast cameras operate with 50 frames per second. So the point of contact with the ball is one of those frames inside the 50 per second. So in other words, offside is damn well offside. And Erik ten Hag saying the wrong angle was viewed. Sorry, Erik, you don't know what they're using. You've no idea what they're using.
The one thing you know where there is clarity, we can sit here on a Monday morning and bemoan certain decisions, but near enough an exact science is the offside law, for me.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can overly criticise that.
Exactly. It's a fairly straightforward sequence of events, Simon, but it's never been more precise than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the default setting of a disappointed manager. And it's a default setting of every manager when they're disappointed. And sometimes I think that's excusable because you're being asked to comment on something directly after the game, so your emotions will run the better of you. The other time I think about it is ultimately these things are things that you have to overcome, and these are challenges that you have to be able to surpass. So I listened to what he said about the penalty. I didn't think it was a penalty. I thought it was offside, and I didn't think Johnny Evans was impeded. So I think all of those things were just the disappointment of a manager that went from looking like he was going to win a game, and the whole conversation this morning, completely different conversation. We're all jumping on the Arsenal bandwagon, but that's the margins of top-end sports. If United had scored that goal and gone on to win the game 2-1, we'd be having a completely different conversation. So there wasn't that much difference between Arsenal and Manchester United. Okay, Manchester United's performance was more atypical of an away side rather than a dominant.
But the scoreline is the scoreline.
The scoreline is a scoreline, and I think the scoreline probably flatters the outcome to some extent.
And the record's a record.
And the record is a record.
He can't beat the big boys away from home.
But he finished third in the table. So irrespective of whether he can beat the big boys at home, some of those big boys finished beneath him in the league. So the question is can United bridge the gap between Arsenal and Man City to win the league? The answer is no. Will Man United finish in the top 4? I would suspect so. Is that what we, in our mind's eye, this idea that Manchester United now have some preordained, God-given right to be the champions of England, that's gone. That's gone. United are not. Ferguson is a thing of the past. You know, this Manchester United, again, to quote something I used previously, is like the Monty Python sketch about the parrot. It's no longer the same parrot. It's a dead parrot.
Right.
Ferguson is no longer there.
Yeah.
You know, and now you've got a whole new direction, and you've got some very significant competitors that can match you on spending. So you've got to be better in every other department. And United, across the board, from their recruitment policy through to the manager and his coaching staff, aren't doing enough. That's why you hear rumblings like players talking out. That's why you hear Ten Hag operating in a certain way. That's why their recruitment policies are being criticised and critiqued, because it isn't the best in class.
Okay. Well, Manchester United's Premier League record away to the Big Six is not good. They just can't do it. They can't do it when it comes to playing the big boys away from home in the Premier League. No wins in 7. 9 goals scored, 24 conceded. Manchester United fans, where are you with this team this morning? 03717 223344.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.